What's up, guys? Jaxel here. Some updates to the USB to 3DO adapter. As per usual, it is still using the firmware from Robert Dale Smith, the Joypad-OS. It's fantastic. You can make these adapters yourself, but these are the pre-made ones that I sell on my Etsy shop. Now, the previous versions, I would have it all wired with manually within this box, so it would take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes to make one of these adapters because it was a lot of wires and a lot of work. So it was getting very cumbersome. I would have to make them in bulk, and people would order them, and I'd say, can you wait a bit because I got to make these adapters, and there's so much work. So instead, I designed and had these carrier boards milled, and I made a lot of them so I can make these adapters on demand instead of having to wire everything directly. It just is already prefabbed, and I dropped the parts in. So I dropped the Waveshare 2040 in right at the top, right there. On the other side, we've got the level shifter, the DB9, and of course the cable itself, which you can see right there. And I have that all labeled with the ground, in audio, left audio, right, clock out, and the 5 volt. So if you want to make these yourself and you don't want to do all the wiring, you want to use my carrier board. I also sell just the carrier board themselves and not the whole adapter, so you can save yourself a little bit of money and still get a carrier board without having to print your own carrier boards. Because you can't just print one carrier board, you got to print them in bulk. So these are also on my shop as well as the completed adapter. So let's discuss some of the changes. Well, actually before that, let's discuss the adapter itself. I've got my 3DO here, and I'm going to plug an adapter in right at the bottom. And then from that adapter, I'm going to plug in my PS5 controller and plug that in there. And I've got my 3DO here. And we can see I now have control. So let's launch the Joypad tester. This is another piece of software written by Robert Dale Smith, specifically to test the Joypad. And so you can see here, I've got those working. I've got the buttons working. There's also different profiles for button configs you can use, which you can see on the website. By holding select for 2 seconds and D up and D down, you can switch to different profiles for fighting games, shooters, and of course the default SNES layout. And those are defined here on this website, which is on GitHub. All right, so we've got one controller plugged in there, but of course this is a 3DO, and so you'll need multiple controllers plugged in, and the 3DO does it through daisy chaining, and I do have the D sub on the top. So let's plug in an official 3DO controller right here, and now it has shown up as controller 2, and I'm hitting those buttons, and you can see they're registering. But what if we wanted to plug in a second PS5 controller? Now, there's multiple ways you can do that. You can daisy chain another adapter. So I'll have 2 adapters right here, and you can daisy chain them the same way. And I have a second PS5 controller, and let's plug that in. And now the second PS5 controller is right here. Got the first PS5 controller there. Let's plug in my 3DO controller right here. And that has shown up as a third controller. But that seems kind of expensive because, these 3DO adapters, they can get up there. I'm selling them for $60 a piece. So that would cost you $120 to have 2 of these adapters. That's wasteful. You don't have to do that. You don't have to pay me that much. It's actually a lot easier. Let's unplug that. And instead, we're going to use a $5 USB hub. And I'm just going to plug that in. Plug one of my USB controllers there, one of my PS5 controllers there. Plug my other PS5 controller there. And now I've got two controllers plugged into one adapter. And I forgot to mention, this also requires external power. Otherwise, it's not going to be enough power to drive multiple PS5 controllers. So let's plug that in there. Make sure it registers. For some reason it's not registering. Let's unplug everything. There we go. There it goes. Now it's working. All right, so I just had to, because I plugged the external power to the USB hub after I plugged it into the adapter, things went a little haywire. So I had to just unplug the adapter and then plug it back in, and everything is working now. And now we've got the one controller there, one controller there. And that's with only a single adapter and a $5 USB hub from Amazon. And that's how you can get your PS5 or pretty much a lot of other different types of USB controllers, including arcade sticks, PS4 controllers, PS3 controllers, Xbox controllers, whatever controller you want to use. If it's USB, you can use it here. Maybe a Game Sir or I don't know what other brands people use. I use the PS5 controller. I think it's a great controller. Anyways, peace out.